Okay, it's time again for another Browns podcast. Myself, Sean Ruane, and Mark Feist are going to talk a little bit Browns with you today, our second edition. And the big news of the week was the signing of defensive end in Adrian Clayborn, formerly of the Atlanta Falcons. I got to tell you, I don't know where Mark's going to come in on this one, but I'm a big fan of the signing. I'm a big fan of the signing for a number of reasons. But number one is, they need some more veteran players on this team. They have one of the youngest rosters in the NFL, and Adrian Clayborn is going to step in, and he's going to understand how the NFL game is played. He's going to understand how to practice. He's going to understand how to act in the meeting rooms, how to prepare for opponents, and do all those things. Now, he's not the kind of guy who's going to be a replacement for Olivier Vernon or be that starter. He's going to be that probably a situational pass rusher, I would guess. But I think he fills a big role in that position, because last year, once Myles Garrett was gone and Vernon missed time, I mean, the guys we were tossing in, I mean, you might as well assign me to play defensive end. They were just really struggling to find guys. They're moving Sheldon Richardson outside, if you remember that. It's not a natural position for him. So I'm a big fan of the signing. Another thing that I really liked about it, I don't know where you fall in with this one, Mark, but it's a short contract. It's only 2 years. The Browns have made a big deal out of these short contracts, the two safeties, Sendejo, and also the kid from the Raiders, yep. Joseph. Both those guys 1-year deals. I'm a big fan of those. Prove it. And Clayborn will be the same way. Come in, prove it. They're on a contract year, for the 1-year deals. Yep. So they're going to play hard. They're going to do everything they can to maximize their money. And then if they walk next year, you get the compensatory picks probably, So I'm a big fan of these shorter term contracts. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, let me start with those shorter term contracts, because I think that's a great input to this section here. And when you talk about these, the comp picks is what it's about, right? So we know we're trying to add talent. To me, what it shows is that as much as we were talked up in the media last year in the offseason with having on paper the best team in the AFC North, what it shows is this front office thought that our depth was horrible. So it wasn't just the coaching last year. I think it has to do a lot with our depth, and you're seeing that with these 1-year deals, prove-it deals. So, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the comp picks would be necessary. And, hey, if we like someone like a Joseph, maybe we do give him another 2 or 3 year deal after this. We'll see. Going back to the Clayborn deal, though, couldn't agree with you more. I think this is huge for the Browns in a lot of ways. The veteran leadership that he brings, I think you mentioned that, 100% on board. I think he's 31, 32 years old. It's a short-term deal, but he's a Super Bowl champ. I mean, he was with the New England Patriots in 2018. He knows how to win games. He's going to be good in that locker room, good in film sessions. He's going to be able to teach some of these young guys. I mean, let's face it, Myles Garrett's still learning. Every day he just needs to still be learning, and this is the guy that he can tag along with. Been in the league for a lot of years. I think the past 5 years, which is rare for a defensive end, but he's been in double-digit games. So, played in or started in them, and that's big for the back end of his career. So I think this is low risk. I think it's a big deal for us, and I couldn't be more happy. So, I think we're all in favor of that. But one thing I think that transitions in is the news that came just recently. Actually, some rumors have been swirling about Clowney, right? So we're talking about maybe the Browns making this deep dive. And it's funny that this comes up, and I'm not saying that I have any insider knowledge, but a couple of days ago I mentioned that I thought that this would be a great pickup for us, a 2-year deal, short-term deal for 28 fully guaranteed. To me, I think that that's just huge for a guy like Clowney. He's still young. He's 26, 27. This would allow him to have another big-time deal later on in his career, one more run at it, if you will. You look at some of these guys, he wants the Lawrence money, he wants the J.J. Watt money, the Frank Clark money. But if I look at it, they're guaranteed money over the next 4 or 5 years, depending on the length of their deal, ranges from $30 million to $48 million. And I'm thinking to myself, if I can get 28 now and then another deal on top of this 2-3 years later, maybe the Browns don't keep me because they want to stick with Garrett. I'm still all in because I know I'm going to get another 25 guaranteed, and that surpasses the max that all of these guys signed for. So I think it's a win-win deal if he came to us on a short-term deal, and I'd be happy to have him. What about your thoughts?
Well, you know what? Initially, when you brought that up, because you did bring that up about a week ago before all the news came out, you were all over that. You said short-term deal for Clowney, a lot of guaranteed money that might appeal to him, especially guys had a little bit of an injury history and so forth. And he certainly brings with him a lot of flash and so forth. But I did a little research on him, and his productivity isn't exactly what I thought it was. Outside of that big hit he made against Michigan in the bowl game, he's had some moments in the NFL, but he hasn't been, he certainly hasn't been dominant consistently. Just a couple of things here. Olivier Vernon's been in the league for 8 years, right? And in those 8 years, he has had 5 16-game seasons. I was all over him in our last podcast for not being very durable. He had 5 of those 8 years. He played 16 games, and he's averaged about 7 sacks a year. Okay, I went back and I looked at Clowney stats. 6 years in the league. You know how many 16-game seasons?
One.
You call it. 1 16-game season, and he's averaged roughly about 6 sacks a year. So I sat there and I looked at it, and I said to myself, I think Olivier Vernon, based on last year, was overpaid. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just wondering if at this time I want to roll the dice on a guy that, and pay him big bucks. Not that Vernon isn't making big bucks, but pay him big bucks, and I'm just not sure what kind of production I'm going to get out of him. What can I expect? You know what I'm saying? So a little nervous. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did the same research, because I really wanted to dig into it a little bit. So kind of going a little bit more off your stats, because that's a great section you brought there. 6 years in the league, only 1 full season. I went back a little bit, and so in 2017 was the only year he played without J.J. Watt, really. So Watt was injured most of that year. I think he played 4 or 5 games. But that was Clowney's best year. He had 9.5 sacks, 21 tackles for a loss. I think he played 15 games that year. That's pretty decent for a second defensive end, if you will, because we hope that Garrett's going to be our number 1 moving forward, right? But 2018, he still has 9 sacks. Last year with Seattle, only 3 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. I mean, it's not flashy, you're right. It's definitely not number 1 money like he wants. But that's why I think if you do a short-term deal, obviously this would be a cut Vernon situation, right? We're not going to pay 2 defensive linemen $15+ million per year while we still have to sign Garrett. But I think it's worth the risk. I know it's another big name in the locker room. A lot of people for Kevin Stefanski to understand how to work with their mindsets, if you will. But, hey, why not give it a try?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I was really on it when you mentioned it. That really, sparked my interest. So I started doing a little bit more research on it. But I got to tell you, I really cooled on the idea after doing that research. So I understand where you're coming from, for sure. All right. Well, the next thing we were going to talk about after our last podcast, there were some suggestions that were bantered about from some of the people who have watched the video. I can't believe any of you actually tuned in to watch this, but I'm thankful that you do. Hopefully, again, we entertain you a little bit. A couple of different things. The first one came from Mike Totoro, who asked if we would discuss a little bit our thoughts on the running back situation in Cleveland. And he had a couple different thoughts. He said, the usage of the 2 running backs. He wondered how the new offense would accommodate those 2 running backs. And then he also said that, it was really intriguing to maybe dangle Kareem Hunt out there as trade bait to move up, because he wasn't really that high on anyone after the top 4 picks or so. He thought maybe you could really, make some hay and move up if you dangled Kareem Hunt out there. Now, I don't know that I'm on board with that, but here's my thought process. Nick Chubb is your traditional tailback. I mean, if this is 30 years ago, he'd have been lining up in the I formation, probably about 27 yards deep, and they'd be tossing him the ball, and he'd be, running, power sweeps and so forth and toss sweeps. Kareem Hunt brings with him a lot of versatility. Backs in that Kansas City offense have to really have some flexibility. He can catch the ball. He can line up in the slot. Heck, he could even run jet sweep, although I don't think they even tried that with him. He could almost be like that. I think that the Ohio State offense called it, their that H back, like super back type position, that slot guy. I think they can get both of those guys on the field at the same time that way, and I think that's really intriguing. So if you're talking about how to use all those guys, you have a traditional fullback that they signed, and then you have the two tailbacks, and then, Dontrell Hilliard, more of a special teams guy, really desperation guy. With the tailbacks you have, I'm kind of excited about that possibility. As far as dangling Kareem Hunt as trade bait, I don't see that happening. His, past history, he's got himself in a little bit of trouble. I think he's a good guy. I do. I don't worry about him as a Browns fan anymore, especially since they've changed the laws with the new collective bargaining agreement, and the testing is going to be a little bit different. But I don't sweat him that way. I would just hold on to him. You're not going to be able to pay both of those guys, though. You have a guy who led the NFL in rushing back in 2017, I think it was, right? Hunt was the leading rusher in the NFL in 2017. Then Nick Chubb was second in the NFL last year. So, you're looking at two guys. You're not going to be able to keep them both. So maybe trading them isn't that bad of an idea. But what are your thoughts, Mark?
Well, I think you bring up a lot of good points there, right? And I'm on board with a lot of it, except for trading him. You don't trade a guy like Kareem Hunt. What are you going to move up? Maybe an extra spot or two, plus you're still going to give away a third and a first, or whatever you got to do. But at the end of the day, it's the NFL. We know running backs get hurt. They're dispensable. So you got to have two of them on your roster. Look across the league. I mean, the Patriots have been doing it for years. They have running backs that can catch the ball. They have running backs that can run straight up the middle. It doesn't matter, but there's always a two-back set at some point in the game. I know the NFL's offense is run and gun right now. A lot of shotgun, a lot of 3-4 wides, like the Rams have it, and things like that, the West Coast style. But at the end of the day, it comes down to December and January, February. You got to pound that ball a little bit. Got to wear these defensive lines down. The point I liked the most that you brought up was the signing of Jadeveon. I think that having a true fullback is going to be huge for this offense, regardless of who's in the backfield. I did a little bit of research, and I look at 2019 just to understand a little bit of the Minnesota offense a little more in depth, right? Kirk Cousins completes over 300 passes, I think around 307 passes, and 1/6 of those were to Delvin Cook. 1/6 to a running back. It's a lot, right? Then you look at the other backup running back and a couple to the fullback, and there was 95 total completions. So 1/3 of his passes were completed to running backs in the 2019 season. You know who that benefits? Kareem Hunt. That's why you don't trade him. He's a versatile back. You mentioned it. He comes from the Kansas City offense. He's had to do this his whole career. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can get north and south real quick. He can make a move if needed. That's why I think you keep him. More importantly, I do want to say Nick Chubb's still your number one running back, okay? We drafted him. We got to stick with him. He is the guy that you can line up in the eye for. But don't be surprised this year if you see a lot of two-back sets with those guys, the wishbone coming at you, and even the diamond formation with Jadeveon back in that backfield as a true fullback. I think you have a lot of options with a two tight end set. I don't think you'll see many times, but I do think occasionally you won't see one receiver on the field for the Browns this year. And I'll be interested to see how that looks.
Yeah, I will be too. And, you bring up another point from another one of our viewers there. One of my coworkers, Josh Murphy, asked about, the new offense and conceptually you wanted to understand a little bit more. And, with those backs and with those, they're one-cut style backs, right? These are not the Barry Sanders, waterbug, jitterbug type guys. They are plant the foot in the ground and get upfield. So that wide zone, for people who aren't that familiar with it, that wide zone offense has, some real basic principles. You're gonna start heading to the sideline and you're gonna stretch the field. And the defense is so desperate to stay in their gaps and everyone's moving so fast to one side that if the defender doesn't, get to his gap, stay outside, it creates a scene for the running back to plant and get up. And then, of course, get up the field. And then, of course, what they do off of that is a bootleg back the other side. This is where your tight ends come in. And, now all of a sudden you've got a tight end running free. It might be a receiver on a crossing route, a lot of crossers. So you're going to run, say, heavy to the right, and the whole defense is flowing to the right because they think you're handing off to Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb. And then all of a sudden the quarterback keeps it. He bootlegs out to the left, and maybe you have OBJ on a deep crosser. You're getting a lot of big chunk plays in that offense that way. So it's not really a throwing offense, but when they do throw it, you hope to get a big chunk play out of it. It's almost like the wing tee in high school football, right? The wing tee, everything's supposed to look exactly the same, and the wide zone is the same way. That wide zone to the right, they're gonna, looks like a run play the whole way until the last second when the quarterback pulls it down and boots out the other way. The wing tee is kind of the same thing. Make it look like run, and then all of a sudden it's a pass. The defense is out of position. You're going to try and throw the ball over their head for a big gainer. I think that's why if you look at some of those receivers, Diggs and so forth, you'll see they had pretty high yards per catch because of that, because of those chunk plays. So I'm really looking forward to see how that works. Clearly with Landry and OBJ, and then the tight ends we have, and Njoku, who can run pretty good for a tight end, I'm expecting a lot of big plays. And then, of course, that opens up the screen game. Now, one last thing on that offense. The one thing, just like in high school football with that wing tee, there's one real pain in the ass problem with those offenses, and the same thing exists with this Shanahan model, and that is if you fall behind, okay, it's tough to come back because no one's respecting your run fakes anymore. They know you have to throw it, and that kills your offensive set. But those are some of the basic things. What else do you see with the offense, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it. You definitely got the players out there. You're going to see a lot of things with Njoku, maybe some tight end screens this year, which is kind of a little rare, but you saw a lot of it from Minnesota, right? I mean, that's how they got Root off the ball and got him in the end zone, especially when they were down. I think probably within that 10-yard line, they'd like to use that a lot. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. I think OBJ, Landry, they're going to be just big chunk guys this year. I think that our tight end and running backs are going to dominate. So, the new signing of Austin Hopper, and then the two running backs we've mentioned, Kareem Hunt and Chubb. I think look for these three to be the biggest play guys on the team. I'm not saying that we won't have 1,000-yard receivers or 100-catch guys, but I'm thinking, when the crunch time comes and it's clutch plays, I think those are going to be the three guys that we really look to, because at the end of the day, that's just the style of offense we have. You bring up a good point, though. I mean, we can't fall behind, and the Browns have been notorious in the past to come out slow or start the third quarter slow, not make the right adjustments. These are things that are going to have to come into play ahead of time because, coaching's a big thing right now, and at the end of the day, we have to be able to adapt. And if we're down more than 10, 12 points, going into that fourth quarter, we're in trouble.
No doubt about that. Now, what are your thoughts on Stefanski in general? There are some people that are a little concerned that he's not maybe as invested in Cleveland as he could be. He's at home right now in Minnesota. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
I know, we're all in the situation, right? So we're all dealing with an issue in the world right now. So I wonder a little bit, how's he balancing his time? He's got a lot of little kids at home. I'm trying to do it personally. So work-life balance, but now it's all just at your house, right? So you don't even have the time to get out of and go to the office, make your, half-hour commute to work where you can burn off a little bit of steam or handle some phone calls. My biggest thing is, man, without the face-to-face interaction, I understand that they're doing virtual meetings and stuff, but on a personal side and truly trying to understand how someone feels about a situation, their reactions, their facial expressions that they might give off in a meeting room, or when you mention something, body language is just a big thing, and I think that's missing. I think that they're going to struggle with that. But it brings me to my point on this topic, and I'm going to just do a complete 180 right now. We've had 9 head coaches plus 2 interim coaches since we came back, and nothing has worked. So what's to say this isn't the day of a new era? We understand that the season starts and, it's September, October, November. the Browns have always run into issues, whether it's, coaching, and you see the Hard Knocks where Hugh Jackson's going at it with Todd Haley, this and that. Well, hey, let's get this out in April and May. Let's start doing this. Let's start understanding each other and have the difficulties of learning a new organization, learning a new coaching staff, learning how people fit within that building. Together now. Let's have these difficulties, and we'll move forward when it comes time to really start playing games, and hopefully we're all on the same page by then, because I can tell you one thing: in the past 20 years, Berea hasn't been on the same page coming out in the home opener.
Yeah, it's real hard to argue with you on that one. Boy, those numbers are staggering, the number of coaches and interim coaches and all those different things. But I'm kind of on the same page as you are at this point. Everyone's doing the same thing, right? Everyone is dealing with, having to do these conference calls and use Zoom and all these different programs like we are in order to accomplish their goals and get ready. My biggest concern is the install of the offense. I'm not that concerned with him establishing relationships. From what I've seen of him and from what I've read interview-wise from players that he's coached and so forth, is he is a real personable guy, comes off as a super intellectual, and you automatically think, oh, there's no way he's going to be able to relate to these guys. But he's been a lifelong, as far as his career, lifelong NFL guy. Obviously, he's been doing this for a lot of years. I don't think we should really sweat that too much. But what I do sweat is getting in the building, which you're unable to do. New head coaches, usually get that extra mini camp too, to get their new offense in and all that kind of stuff, and not going to be able to do that this year. The only thing, going back to our discussion of that Stefanski offense, I'm going to stop calling it the Shanahan offense and call it the Stefanski offense. The only thing that I like about it is, number one, the guys you brought in. So I'll go with Keenum, and we'll go with Hooper and Conklin. All three of those guys have played in this system before. Now, whether it was under Kyle Shanahan or whether it was under Kevin Stefanski, they played in it before. They understand the concepts. That's helpful to have someone who can help teach some of the other guys. The other thing is, just like we were talking about earlier in the podcast, it's an offense that so much of what you do is predicated off of the same basic play. So if you're going to run wide zone right, off of that wide zone right, there can be a called cutback. There can be, a specific pass play action. There can be a bootleg off of it. It's all going to be the same. So your alignment, your formations, so on and so forth, it's all going to be very, very similar. And then you branch off specific plays off of that. It's not like the Freddie Kitchens where one play you go out there and you're 5 wide and he's talking about, being out there with certain personnel grouping and no one can defend it. And then 2 plays later, you're lined up with 3 tight ends. It's going to be, pretty consistent, I think, with what they put on the field. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, I can't disagree with you at all right there. I mean, at the end of the day, forgot about the extra mini camp until you mentioned it. It jogs my memory. That is something we're missing out on, and implementing this system for the ones who haven't seen it, Baker included. It's going to be something that we really need to work on, and when we do finally get in person and the team together, we're really going to have to hit the ground running. So got to hope that those playbooks are as accurate as they can be right now, where these guys are doing their at-home studies. And at the same time, you got to make sure that they're watching film, whether it's, as you mentioned, the Shanahan style of what they've been doing in San Fran for the past couple of years, or even down in Atlanta when he had those 2 big body wide receivers, or what Stefanski's done since, I guess, 2018 here in Minnesota. So it's going to be difficult. I think you're right. But I do think, on the same note, we won't be seeing a lot of the personnel shifts on offense. You won't be going from, the wing T or 4 wide every other play, and then all of a sudden Baker's out at wide receiver or running the slot or something. You're not going to see that stuff with Stefanski, and I'm happy about it. We need to be a little more traditional. We need to get our playmakers the ball, and I think we got the guy to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Okay. Now, the only other thing I want to talk about tonight, and then after I go through this, you can add anything you want. been kind of kicking around the idea of a mock draft that's kind of interactive. The Browns are set to pick at pick number 10, and I'm going to take kind of a collaboration of mock drafts that I find on the internet and put together the most commonly picked players from number 1 through 9. And then, of course, the Browns pick at number 10, and I'm going to ask anyone who watches the podcast if they want to make the Browns pick at number 10, and they could send it to me or just say it in on YouTube, in the comment section on YouTube, because we'll be posting this on YouTube. If you want to leave it there, what your selection would be, and then we will reveal everyone's picks. If they do an email, text message, whatever, we'll reveal everyone's picks and talk about what we would do at number 10 in our next podcast, which is going to be about the NFL draft, unless some other big Browns news breaks. They could trade Baker Mayfield for Tom Brady, in between now and then. We shall see what happens. But is there anything else you'd like to add before we cut off here, Mark?
No, I mean, I'm all in for that. So, for our viewers that are out there, if you guys want to add a comment of who you take at number 10, we can definitely discuss it. All we ask is that maybe you get it into us a week or so before the draft so we can at least host the podcast, do a little bit of research on those guys before the draft, because on Friday after the first round pick, you and I will be meeting up talking about what the hell just went on and hoping we both agree on something for once.
Absolutely. All right. Well, if you made it this far into the podcast, thanks for listening all the way through. We really appreciate it. We have a good time doing this. We hope you enjoy it too. If you want to participate, remember that you can, since I'm putting this on YouTube, you can put the comments on YouTube so that we can see what additions you'd like us to make and any topics you'd like us to discuss, or you could email me at sjruane, Ruane 85 @gmail.com. And we can, discuss anything that you want to discuss or make any improvements. As far as having more Brown stuff in the pictures, I know there were some multiple questions about that. Sorry, that's I'm limited. I put on the shirt. Okay, that's the best I can do, and Mark took care of that. And also for those of you who want intro music and things of that nature, you're really stretching my tech abilities, but I'll see what I can do for the next time. All right. Thanks a lot. We appreciate you if you watched it. See you next time.
All right.
Whoops. I'm going to stop it here in a second.